You already paid the first bill, you just don't know the other four are coming. A global energy crisis is currently moving through the American economy in slow motion. Not one shock, but five separate price increases, each arriving on its own schedule, each looking completely unrelated to the last by the time it lands in your wallet. And here's the part that should stop you cold. The one hitting Americans hardest won't show up until October. By then, most people will have completely forgotten what triggered it. At Decoded, we don't do vague warnings. We do timelines, data, and exact steps. So let's get into it, because understanding this 5 minutes from now is worth a lot more than understanding it in November. Before the five shocks, you need one piece of context, because without it, nothing that follows will make sense. On February 28, 2026, following escalating regional tensions, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. What happened next reshaped every commodity market on the planet. Iran responded by announcing the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, a 21-mile-wide waterway between Iran and Oman that, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, handles roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day, about 20% of all global petroleum consumption. On a normal day, 130 commercial vessels transit that strait. The IEA's own director described it as the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Not the largest this decade, not the largest since the pandemic, the largest ever recorded. In response, the IEA released 400 million barrels of oil from emergency reserves, the largest drawdown in the agency's entire history. When the organization specifically built to handle global energy emergencies pulls that lever at full capacity, that is not a routine response. That is a five-alarm situation. According to Wikipedia's documented timeline of the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis, Brent crude surged past $120 per barrel following the closure. It has since retreated to around $100 on ceasefire signals, but Bloomberg Economics warns that if the closure extends deep into the second quarter, oil could move sharply higher, with some Wall Street analysts putting figures between $170 and $200 per barrel on the table in a prolonged scenario. What you see at the pump right now is the opening act. Four more are loading up behind it. Throughout this breakdown, we're going to track two American households, not because their stories are dramatic, but because they make the abstract real. First, there's Danielle. She's 34, a licensed physical therapist in Cincinnati, Ohio, earning $61,000 a year. She has $5,100 sitting in a high-yield savings account, no credit card balance, and she's been auto-investing $200 a month into a broad index fund since 2023. She doesn't follow financial news obsessively, she just set up a few systems and left them running. Then there's Kevin and Amber, dual-income couple in the same metro area. Kevin manages a warehouse distribution center, Amber works in dental office administration. Combined, they bring in $96,000 a year, but their liquid savings sits at $900. They carry $7,400 on a credit card at 23% APR. And like a lot of Americans, they've been loosely waiting for rates to come down before making any big financial moves. That waiting just got a lot more expensive. Same city, same supermarket, same five shocks headed their way, completely different outcomes, and income has almost nothing to do with why. Shock 1. The gas pump. What you're already feeling. According to AAA, the national average gasoline price as of this week is $4.09 per gallon. Smart Assets analysis of AAA data confirms that many states have experienced a 33% year-over-year increase in the cost of a gallon of regular gas, and in some places even higher. California is sitting at $5.89 per gallon. But the number that carries far more economic weight than your regular gas price is diesel. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, the national average for on-highway diesel reached $5.40 per gallon for the week ending March 30th, more than 50% higher than this time last year. In California, diesel now exceeds $7 per gallon. And in states like Arizona, South Carolina, and Texas, diesel costs have climbed by more than 60% compared to a year ago. Here is what most people miss about diesel. This is not just a trucking industry problem. Diesel is the circulatory system of the American economy. Every refrigerated trailer moving produce across state lines, every combine harvesting corn in Iowa, every last-mile delivery truck dropping a package at your front door. RSM U.S. Chief Economist Joe Brusuelas told Bloomberg that a 10% rise in diesel could push up the headline consumer price index by 0.1 percentage points. We are not looking at 10%, we are looking at 50%. GasBuddy's head of petroleum analysis Patrick DeHaan warned publicly that the full effects of higher diesel prices have yet to be felt, and that those effects will flow through the economy over the next several months. The bill for what happened in February is still being calculated. For Danielle, this triggered one honest look at her weekly habits. She was spending around $55 a week on gas for a 24-mile daily commute. She started combining errands into one trip per week and began working from home one extra day, something her employer already allowed. For Kevin and Amber, the same fuel math applies to their budget, but nothing has changed yet because the individual hit feels manageable. The problem is that shock one never travels alone.
Here is a supply chain reality that most financial coverage is not connecting clearly enough. Your food budget and your gas budget are the same conversation, separated by about 45 days. GasBuddy's Patrick DeHaan told CNBC directly that consumers could see the impact at the supermarket and in their online orders by April. That timeline is now. The mechanism is straightforward. Freight carriers who deliver food to grocery distribution centers include fuel surcharge clauses in their shipping contracts, clauses that allow them to pass a significant portion of diesel cost increases through to shippers within 30 to 60 days. Those costs move to retailers. Retailers absorb what their margins allow, then pass the rest to you. Supply chain experts quoted by CNBC confirmed it would only take a few weeks for the impact to hit prices across a wide range of products. Tony Pelly, practice director of supply chain security at BSI Consulting, told CNBC specifically that the grocery store would be impacted. Andre Quinn Barabanov, supply chain industry practice lead at Moody's, confirmed that for many commodities, inventories typically cover only a few weeks, meaning shortages and price increases could emerge relatively quickly if disruptions persist. Compound that with an already strained grocery environment. Beef, dairy, eggs, and cooking oils were already elevated heading into 2026. Retailers have been quietly absorbing cost pressure for over a year using margin cushions built up during the post-pandemic recovery period. Those cushions are now essentially depleted. When the buffer runs out, prices don't drift upward gradually, they catch up in a cluster. For Danielle, her monthly grocery spend of roughly $380 is trending toward $430 to $450 by May based on current freight surcharge trajectories. She shifted to cooking larger batches on weekends, cutting down on midweek store runs, and canceled a specialty food subscription she had been paying $79 a month for. For Kevin and Amber, May's checkout total is going to feel like a malfunction. They'll stand at the register staring at a number $70 to $90 higher than their mental budget projected. They'll look at their cart, nothing will look obviously different from what they usually buy. They'll assume they missed something. They didn't. Shock 3, fertilizer, an October problem being created right now. Stop and pay attention here because this is the shock that is going to blindside more Americans than any other, not because the information is hidden, but because the delay between cause and effect is long enough that the connection gets completely severed in most people's minds. Here is the supply chain link that almost no mainstream outlet is drawing clearly. According to the World Economic Forum, the Gulf region accounts for at least 20% of all seaborne fertilizer exports globally, with the dependency even more acute for urea, the world's most widely used nitrogen fertilizer, where 46% of global trade originates from that region. Nitrogen fertilizer is manufactured primarily from natural gas. Fossil fuels account for 70 to 90% of production costs, and all of those exports move through a strait that is currently closed. The real-world consequences are already visible in American agricultural markets. According to CNBC, urea prices at the New Orleans fertilizer hub, one of the most critical agricultural import points serving Midwest corn and soybean farmers, have already risen from $475 per metric ton to $680 per metric ton. That is a 43% increase in weeks. Daryl Fletcher, managing director of commodities at Bannockburn Global Forex, told CNBC directly that the timing is not great for the Midwest planting window for soy and corn. The Dallas Federal Reserve's own published research confirmed that the disruption affects not only oil, but also natural gas and fertilizer exports from the Persian Gulf, with direct implications for agriculture in the Northern Hemisphere. Their analysis specifically projects that the fertilizer price shock during the spring planting season could reduce the planting and yields of corn in the U.S., the primary feedstock for American beef, poultry, and dairy, and potentially increase food prices into 2027, not 2026, into 2027. Here is the agricultural calendar problem that makes this shock uniquely damaging. Spring planting decisions across the American Corn Belt are being finalized right now in April. The choices farmers make this month, how much to fertilize, what to plant, what acreage to scale back on, directly determine what comes out of the ground in October. You will not feel this shock at the checkout in April. You will not feel it in July. You will feel it in October, standing in the produce aisle, looking at prices that seem completely untethered from anything you can logically explain. And by then, nobody is going to connect those October numbers back to a planting season that was compromised 8 months ago. For Danielle, this is the shock she cannot fully prevent, but she knows it is coming, which means she will not be caught off guard by it. She is already pricing out a chest freezer to stock proteins and frozen produce before fall hits. She's thinking 3 seasons ahead. For Kevin and Amber, October is going to feel like the economy has personally singled them out. They'll tell people at Thanksgiving that groceries have just been insane lately. Nobody at that table will connect it back to a planting season that was compromised 8 months ago.
Shock 4. Airfare. The window is closing in real time. Direct reality check. If summer travel is anywhere on your radar and you haven't locked in flights yet, this section is going to be uncomfortable. That discomfort right now is significantly cheaper than the bill you'll face if you wait. According to the Argus U.S. Jet Fuel Index, as published by Airlines for America, jet fuel prices in the U.S. have surged 85% since the day before this conflict began in February, hitting a record $4.62 per gallon. United Airlines CEO Scott Kirby stated publicly that jet fuel prices have more than doubled in 3 weeks, and that if prices stayed at current levels, it would mean an extra $11 billion in annual expense for United alone, just for fuel. According to federal data analysis by Michigan State professor Jason Miller, jet fuel accounts for roughly 25% of an airline's total operating costs. When that cost doubles in 3 weeks, the question is not whether fares go up, it is how fast and by how much. The answer is already in the data. OAG flight information data shows the average airfare in the past week reached $465, the highest price point for that same period since at least 2019. Tourism Economics Director of Global Forecasting Helen McDermott projected in a published research note that airfares will run 5 to 10% higher than previously expected across 2026 and 2027. Summer routes are tracking even higher. CNBC reported summer fares already running approximately 18% above year-ago levels. NPR aviation reporter Sean Kudahi put it plainly when asked whether travelers should book now or wait. Book now. And his advice extended to domestic flights, not just international. The reason airlines behave differently from grocery stores is that they model fuel costs months in advance and build those projections directly into ticket pricing. Fares that rise during a fuel shock do not quietly drift back down when oil softens. The pricing mechanism simply does not work that direction on a short timeline. Danielle booked her flights to visit family in Denver 3 weeks ago, when most people were still processing what was happening at the gas pump. She locked in round-trip tickets from Cincinnati for $218. That same route is currently showing $341. That is not a deal she stumbled onto. That is a decision she made before the information became obvious to everyone else. Kevin and Amber have been loosely planning a beach trip since January. When they finally look up flights this week, the conversation afterward is going to shift the tone of their entire month. Shock 5. Interest rates. The most expensive shock and the quietest one. This is the shock that will cost the average American family the most total dollars in 2026. It will never appear on any receipt. It shows up instead as a percentage that simply refuses to move in the direction your financial life required it to move. At the start of 2026, markets were pricing in multiple Federal Reserve rate cuts throughout the year: lower mortgage rates, cheaper auto financing, relief for Americans carrying credit card debt at 21 to 24% APR. People were building purchasing timelines, refinancing windows, and debt payoff plans around those expected cuts. According to CNBC's reporting on the March meeting, before the conflict, markets had been pricing in 2 rate reductions this year, but rising oil prices and persistent inflation readings have pushed expectations down to at most 1 cut in 2026. The CME Group's FedWatch tool subsequently showed traders pricing the probability of a rate hike, not a cut, above 50% for the first time. The Federal Reserve voted 11-1 at its March 18th meeting to hold the federal funds rate steady at 3.5 to 3.75%. The official statement published directly on the Federal Reserve's website acknowledged the bind plainly. Uncertainty about the economic outlook remains elevated, and the implications of developments in the Middle East for the U.S. economy are uncertain. Chair Jowell Powell told reporters at the press conference that it was too soon to know the full impact, while acknowledging that near-term inflation expectations have risen significantly due to the oil price surge. Moody's Analytics puts U.S. recession probability near 50%, according to CNBC's reporting. Goldman Sachs raised its forecast to 30%. EY Parthenon and Wilmington Trust are placing odds at 40 or greater. The Fed's dual mandate, keeping prices stable while maintaining maximum employment, is now pulling in 2 opposite directions simultaneously. Higher oil prices argue for keeping rates elevated to cool inflation, but those same higher oil prices slow consumer spending and threaten jobs, which argues for cutting. There is no policy decision that solves both problems at once. Fidelity's lead monetary policy analyst, Andrew Garvey, told Fidelity's own research platform that the added uncertainty has only strengthened the case for the Fed to hold steady and wait. What does this mean in plain dollar terms? Your refinancing window has narrowed significantly. The mortgage dip that was going to make home buying viable has moved in the wrong direction. And if you are carrying a credit card balance at 23% interest, that balance is now the single most expensive thing in your financial life, because the rate relief that was supposed to arrive this year is no longer on schedule. For Danielle, this is genuinely frustrating. The home purchase she's been working toward keeps moving out of reach as rates refuse to cooperate. But her savings are in an account earning 4.1%, no credit card debt creating drag on her cash flow, and her index fund contributions are still running automatically, untouched, even as her balance dropped on paper and every instinct told her to do something. For Kevin and Amber, the $2,400 at 23% APR has gone from a background annoyance to a foreground emergency, because the rate environment that might have provided relief is now pointing the other direction.
Now, here is where the shock gets most consequential for anyone with money invested anywhere. The Dalbar Quantitative Analysis of Investor Behavior, the most widely cited annual study of retail investor performance, found that the average investor has underperformed the broader market for more than a decade consecutively, not because of poor stock selection, because of a single recurring behavior: selling during turbulent periods and buying back in after the recovery has already happened. 7 of the 10 best single trading days in any given 20-year market period occur inside bear market conditions. 6 of those 7 happen within 2 weeks of the worst days. The recovery does not build gradually so you can ease back in comfortably. It happens fast, in exactly the window when most people are still too scared to act. Missing only the 10 best trading days per decade since 1930 would have converted a nearly 15,000% cumulative return into 91%. That is the complete mathematical destruction of long-term wealth through decisions that felt protective in the moment. Danielle's portfolio is down on paper right now. She opened the app once, noted the number, closed it, and went back to her weekend meal prep.
Kevin opened his 401k statement, felt a wave of dread settle in, and has been avoiding looking at it since. 10 years from now, both of them could be in almost the same financial position, unless Kevin converts a temporary paper decline into a permanent, unrecoverable loss through a fear-driven decision in the next 90 days. Your emergency fund needs to be larger, and it needs to be earning. According to Federal Reserve survey data, nearly half of American adults cannot absorb a $400 unexpected expense without borrowing. When your car needs brake work, your water heater fails, or a medical bill lands during a period where fuel, groceries, airfare, and interest rates are all moving against you simultaneously, the difference between having liquid savings and not is the difference between a minor inconvenience and a 23% credit card charge compounding for 8 months. High-yield savings accounts at institutions like Marcus by Goldman Sachs, Ally Bank, and Discover are currently paying between 4.0 and 4.2%, more than 10 times the national average savings rate. High-interest credit card debt is not a background problem right now. It is a foreground emergency. Paying off a card at 23% interest is mathematically equivalent to earning a guaranteed 23% annual return. Do not stop contributing to your investments. Do not touch existing investments. The instinct to pause contributions, move to cash, and wait for things to settle is the exact behavior the Dalbar study shows consistently destroys long-term returns across millions of accounts over more than a decade. Keep automated contributions running exactly as they are. If you have summer travel plans, book flights today. According to aviation experts, including NPR's Sean Kudahi and tourism economics forecasters, fares for summer routes are already up 18% year over year and rising further. Audit your actual energy exposure. Long daily commute in a vehicle getting 18 miles per gallon? That cost profile changed materially this month and deserves a fresh look. What history consistently demonstrates is that the Americans who come through economic disruptions with the least lasting financial damage are not the highest earners in the room. They're the ones who saw the full picture before it was obvious, who understood that 5 shocks travel together even when they arrive separately, and who took 5 quiet actions while everyone around them was still deciding to be concerned. Danielle made no dramatic moves. She audited her driving, cut 1 subscription, bought flights early, kept her contributions running, and didn't touch her savings. That's the entire list. That's what separates her outcome from Kevin and Amber's, and it has nothing to do with her income level, her luck, or any special access to information that most people don't have.
Most Americans are going to spend the rest of 2026 confused about why their budget keeps coming up short month after month, why their grocery bill keeps creeping upward with no clear explanation, why interest rates won't cooperate with plans they made in January. You just spent the last 20 minutes understanding exactly where each of those pressures is coming from, when each one lands, and what to do before it gets there. But here's the honest follow-through to everything we just covered. The 5 action steps we walked through, the emergency fund, the debt payoff, the investment discipline, the flight booking, the energy audit, all of it lands more effectively when the financial foundation underneath it is already solid. And that is precisely what we built our last Dollar Decoded video around. We call them the minimalist money rules, the smallest set of financial habits that once locked in as automatic defaults mean you almost always have money available regardless of what the economy throws at you next. It is not about cutting everything you enjoy or building complicated financial systems. It is about a handful of defaults that run quietly in the background of your life the way Danielle's do, so that when 5 economic shocks arrive in the same year, you are adjusting from a position of strength rather than scrambling from behind. If your honest reaction to today's video was that you need to get the basics right before any of this matters, that video is the exact right next step for you. It is linked right here. Watch that one, come back, and the 5 shocks we covered today will feel a lot less threatening when your foundation is already built for exactly this kind of moment. If Dollar Decoded gave you something genuinely useful today, a timeline, a data point that reframes something, a connection that finally clicked into place, hit like. It directly helps this content reach more Americans before the shocks arrive rather than after. Subscribe to Dollar Decoded if you want to keep seeing your financial reality decoded this clearly, this early, and this honestly. We will see you in the next one.